Hello, folks. It's me again, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide in the wonders of the wonderful city, also known as Rio de Janeiro. And on this video, I'm gonna talk about each one of the main members of the Inconfidents of Minas. In this video, though, I'm not gonna talk about what was the Inconfidence of Minas, and also one of them, which was Tiradentes. I'm not gonna be talking about him in this video as well, simply because I have already made videos both about Tiradentes and about the Inconfidence of Minas, which I will leave the cards up here so that those of you who haven't seen them yet might click here and watch them. And mind you, there was even a woman involved directly. But before I get right onto the theme of the video, I have to remind you that I'm currently offering walking tours in the city of Rio, and yes, presential tours. And all you have to do is go to my website, which the link is going to be in the description box below, as well as in the first fixed comment. So all you have to do is click there, contact me via WhatsApp, book your tours, choose the tour of your preference, of course, and let's get to know the city of Rio in person, folks. With me, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide, of course. Who else? Our very first Inconfident that we're going to talk about today is none other than Cláudio Manuel da Costa. And he was a poet, and not just any poet, the poet who introduced the style which in Portuguese is called arcadismo in Brazil. The arcadismo is the literature version of Brazil embracing the pleasure principle. Remember, which I mentioned when I spoke about the Rococo style in the video about the French artistic mission? That I mentioned in that video was in terms of painting and architecture, and this was that same thing, only in terms of poetry and literature. The main characteristic of this movement is that, as I said before, it embraces the pleasure principle, so it does away with the complex language and the religious concerns of the Baroque. No, let's stop concerning ourselves so much with religion and worship and suffering and all of that. Also, in the arcadismo, it was the style at the time to pretend like you were an idyllic shepherd. You may remember Queen Marie Antoinette, the idyllic farm that she built in the Petit Trianon. That was what this style echoed in terms of poetry. Back to him. He was born in the rural area of Ribeirão do Carmo, which nowadays is the city of Mariana in the state of Minas Gerais, and was from a very rich family. Basically, all of them had this in common. They came from very wealthy families and decided to throw their lives away by inspiring themselves with the French of all revolutions. Oh boy.
Oh, but Amanda, the French Revolution was wonderful. Les enfants de la patrie. It was against tyranny. It was against absolute monarchy.
Well, I have a few words for you. Reign of Terror. Google it and you'll see what I'm talking about. In fact, no wonder that the Romantics came after the French Revolution, and their main characteristic, you might recall, was being disappointed with everything, with life. Guess why? Because the French Revolution didn't give the wonderful things that it promised. Close parenthesis, going back to him, he studied in the Jesuit school in Rio de Janeiro, and in 1753, he graduated law school in the University of Coimbra in Portugal, as was custom among young men of wealthy families. And between 1762 and 1765, he occupied the position of Secretary of the Government of what I believe would be the state of Minas nowadays. And it was only in 1789, when he was already 60 years old, that he participated in the movement of the Inconfidence of Minas. And when the movement was betrayed, he was arrested and taken to prison at the Casa dos Contos in the city of Ouro Preto, which is this place over here. Oh my goodness, I miss Ouro Preto so much. You have no idea. And a few days later, he was found dead with a rope around his neck. The official version is that he committed suicide, but the truth is that to this day, nobody knows if he actually committed suicide or if he was in fact killed by order of the Portuguese crown. And also, legend has it that whoever walks by the Casa dos Contos or even happens to be inside the Casa dos Contos at night sometimes hears footsteps and even hears his spirit reading his poems.
Para cantar de amor tenho cuidados. Toma entre vós, ó montes, o instrumento. Ouvi, pois, o meu fúnebre lamento. Se é que de compaixão sois animados.
Done? Oh boy. These ghosts. All you have to do is mention them and here they come. Our next inconfident is this gentleman over here. By the way, a very well-known and popular inconfident, Tomás Antônio Gonzaga. He was actually Portuguese of birth. He was born in the city of Porto in August 11th, 1744, and he came to Brazil and started living here when he was 7 years old. And he too was from a very wealthy family. He also studied in a school run by Jesuit priests in Bahia. And at 17 years old, he also went to study in Coimbra law. So, another one who graduated law school. And he wrote a thesis in order to apply for the position of teacher, which was published and is entitled Treaty of Natural Law. In 1782, he returned to Brazil as, well, the name of the position in Portuguese is ouvidor, overseer, I guess you could say. It was the person who received complaints from the people in regards to the government and took them to the government. He also made friends with the poets of the Arcadismo. And not only that, he wrote poems of that style of his own. Because you see, when he got to Vila Rica, or current Ouro Preto, where I showed you the Casa dos Contos, he fell in love with a young woman called Maria Doroteia Joaquina de Seixas, to whom he was engaged, by the way, so the families more than approved this relationship, and he wrote poems in her honor, calling her Marília and calling himself Dirceu. Yes, most of the poets of the Arcadismo adopted pseudonyms, sometimes Greek-sounding pseudonyms, so that they would be like shepherds in ancient Greece, and in his poems, it's very common for him to say,
I am a noble and righteous shepherd, and all of the other shepherds envy me. And how much do I love you, my dear Marília?
In 1786, he was nominated as, I forgot the term for this in English, but it is a very high position in the judiciary branch here in Brazil. It's a desembargador in Bahia, but he postponed this as much as he could because, he was in love with the young lady that I mentioned and they were going to get married. So he probably thought,
Oh, well, I'll marry her first and then I'll take my beloved Marília with me.
But in the end, he didn't occupy this position, nor did he get married. Because guess what? He got involved in the Inconfidents of Minas. And when the whole thing was discovered, he was arrested and taken to this place over here, which is the Fortaleza da Conceição here in Rio. And in prison is where he wrote the second part of the book Maria de Dirceu, which, if you want to acquire it, you absolutely can. It's on sale to this day. In fact, I mentioned in my video about the National Library that the very first book ever to be printed in Brazil after the Brazilian press was created was precisely this book by him. Oh, the irony. But don't worry, I will also leave the cards up here for you to check it out in case you choose to do so. So he was sentenced to exile in Mozambique, where he was sent to in 1792, and there he was able to start over. He worked as a judge at customs, and he married a widow called Julia Mascarenhas. So seriously, did he love his beloved Marilia all that much, as the poems suggest? I wonder. Our next inconfident is the priest José da Silva e Oliveira Rolim. Oh boy. Here in Brazil, we had a very famous soap opera called Chica da Silva, which was about the love story between a slave girl called Chica da Silva and the representative of the King of Portugal in the city where she was born, which was the Arraial do Tijuco and current Diamantina in the state of Minas. To sum it up, he was a very sought after husband by all of the white unmarried women of the city, and he fell in love with her, a slave. And the problem wasn't him falling in love with her, mind you, because if he had simply carried on with her and married a rich white woman, no one would have said anything. In fact, they probably would have congratulated him for this. But the problem was that he gave her every dignity of a wife. And the society of the time would not have this. It was very much a forbidden love affair. But the reason why I'm saying this is because the priest José da Silva e Oliveira Rolim was son of the current representative of the King of Portugal at the time, that is in 1747, and he lived together with none other than Quitéria Rita, which was the daughter of Chica da Silva and the former representative whose name was João Fernandes de Oliveira. So my goodness, we already had the soap opera, it could be the sequel. Don't you think? And mind you, he had 4 children with her.
But Amanda, you're saying that a priest had a woman and children? How did that happen?
He wasn't originally a priest. He took up holy orders in order to rid himself of a criminal sentence, you see, because when gold started dwindling, his family was very much affected by this. So they started practicing illegal commerce of gold. So in order to get rid of that, he sought holy orders when he was 32 years old. A very smart man, wouldn't you say? But the thing is that he wasn't much of a letters man. He didn't like to study. He went to study in Coimbra, but he sucked at it. And he had difficulty writing and was a terrible communicator. The profession of priest did not suit him. And when the Viscount of Barbacena refused to withdraw the sentence of banishment against him, he added insult to injury by getting involved in the Inconfidents of Minas.
I'm being criminally charged already, but nah, it's too easy. Let's commit high treason.
And then he was judged for the crime of high treason, and he spent 15 years in jail. First in the fortress of São Bento da Saúde, and later in the monastery of Saint Benedict of Saúde, both in Lisbon. However, already in 1805, he was back in Brazil with his wife and children. This one cheated the system like nobody's business. And he even fought to regain his possessions, which had been confiscated, and he managed to get it with the Declaration of Independence, and they even compensated him financially. Fancy that. And finally, in 1835, he was buried in the Church of Carmo, and his burial was with rituals of the Freemasons. I wonder if they helped him cheat the system like this. Very likely, because no one on their own is going to cheat the system so well. Our next inconfident is an actual priest, Carlos Correia de Toledo y Melo. He was born in the city of Taubaté, in the state of São Paulo, and he established himself in Minas, becoming a priest in the city of São José del Rei, which is currently the city of Tiradentes. Once again, a very rich man with several properties and several slaves as well. And he got involved in the Inconfidents of Minas, and because of this, he was arrested in 1789, and his worldly goods were confiscated by the Portuguese crown. And he was also the brother of the man whose remains are in this urn over here. And you can even see the emblem of the Inconfidence of Minas as well, the triangle saying Libertas que será também. He was deported to Portugal without knowing what his sentence was, and he was arrested in the fortress of São Julião da Barra, and later he was sent to the place where the priests cloistered themselves from the rest of the world, and he died there in 1803. By the way, this is where he was sent to and where he died in 1803. And nowadays it is the Academy of Fine Arts of the University of Lisbon. Moving on with our Inconfidence. The next three Inconfidence, I'm sorry to say that I didn't find any paintings or portraits of them, so I'm gonna have to just talk about them without showing you anything. But I'm gonna try and make this as fun as the other part of the video. Anyways, our next Inconfident is Francisco de Paula Freire de Andrade, and he was a military man, colonel lieutenant of the Dragons of the Regiment of Minas Gerais, and in 1789 he got involved as well in the Inconfidence of Minas, and in fact he was responsible for providing the house in which the Inconfidence would gather in secret. This house is in Ouro Preto to this day, and I believe I also showed it in the video that I made about the Inconfidence. When he was arrested, his punishment was being banished to Pedras de Angola in Mozambique, to where he left in 1792. And he was only given permission to come back to Brazil in 1808, and he really wanted to come back to Brazil, but this time fate itself didn't allow him to come back, because he died on December 13th, 1808 in Luanda, in Africa. Sometime it just isn't meant to be. The next one is Francisco Antônio de Oliveira Lopes, which was a wealthy landowner, and he also had investments in the gold rush, and he resided with his family in the Ponta do Morro farm in Prados in the state of Minas. Because he was involved in the Inconfidence, his sentence was perpetual exile in Mozambique, to which he also left in 1792, and it doesn't say that he came back. So I believe, just like Tomás Antônio Gonzaga, he started his life over there and stayed there. Last but definitely not least, remember the woman that I said was also involved? Well, it was none other than Hipólita Jacinta Teixeira de Melo, and she was married to Francisco Antônio de Oliveira Lopes, and her participation in the Inconfidence was in the form of messenger, shall we say. She sent messages back and forth between the Inconfidents. But not only that, when the Inconfidents were arrested, she tried to articulate with military leaders from Minas in order to go on with the revolution plans. So you can see that she was a very active member in the Inconfidence of Minas and very much risked her life by doing so. And you can also see that most of the Inconfidents actually were very lucky, because Queen Mary I was actually very merciful with the vast majority of them, so much so that the only two who actually died were Cláudio Manuel da Costa and Tiradentes, who was condemned to be hung, drawn, and quartered. The majority of them got it easy, as you can see. My friends, this concludes this video about the members of the Inconfidence of Minas. And I hope you liked the content. And if you did like the content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, share this video with as many people as you possibly can so that each time more people may know about the wonders of the wonderful city. And as usual in this channel, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!